Hi, I'm Robert Joseph, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this swimsuit. So this looks a little bit similar to a few of my other patterns, but it has a few differences. So the first one is that I have a much slimmer waistband area. Although I still use a 1-inch wide elastic for the top part of the waistband, I have actually decreased the height of the waistband around the side area. Also, I have a more contoured cut from the bottom of the inseam up to the waist, so it's cut in a little bit slimmer there. Although I've added a little bit more pouch and raised the pouch a little bit, you will notice that it actually has a little bit more contouring here in the front. So one more note about this front pouch, and actually the whole pattern, is that I've made the pouch pattern combinational, meaning that you could use a different size pouch with a different size back pattern piece. And there are just two pattern pieces to this suit. So say you need a large pouch, but you need the medium waist size. So you could use the medium back pattern piece and the large front pouch without losing any of the waist width measurement. You'll just get a little bit more area for your pouch. So I'm going to turn this around so you can see that I've given it a full rear end. So it goes all the way around the rear end. And then I've added a little bit of height just here for those of you that might need a little bit more room in the upper part of your rear. So it's a pretty easy pattern to put together. I do line the front here, and I also do give it a drawstring. So just be aware of that. Again, you're probably going to need, maybe a half yard of fabric to make this, and that's just because of the height of the pattern pieces. So some of the larger sizes may require a little bit more fabric, but when I say a half yard of fabric, you could probably almost get 2 suits out of a half yard. So again, your yardage is cut based on the height of the fabric that you need. So with that said, we will get right into the tutorial after the intro. We're ready to get started. I just want to talk about the pattern just really quickly. So this is the front pouch. You're going to cut 2 self here and cut 2 lining. Now if you choose not to line, just remember that you're going to have that center front seam that you're going to have to deal with. So for the back, you're going to cut this on the fold, and you're just going to cut 1. I do not give guidance for cutting a lining, but if you want to line the back, just cut another one of these out of the lining. The back doesn't necessarily need to be lined. So with this front, I have a notch here, and that's just to match up all of your fronts. But I do want to point out that where the front pouch and where the front pouch and the back meet up here for this seam, you'll line up for your notches, and this will be over kind of like this, right? And then you'll sew your seam. I want to say that for all of the sizes, this seam here on both of these are the same, stay the same length. So what that means is the way that I've designed this is if you need a larger or smaller pouch, you can use this same pattern and just gradually go to the size of the pouch you need. So it will not change the waist width at all. That's the way that I've designed it, with a small exception. So what I mean to say is that I kept this part out. I threw it away, and then I thought I would just show you. So this is the front pouch before I cut it out of the pattern. So when these two line up here, these two seams stay the same height or the same amount. So you can put any pouch on any back that you want to. So say that you are a medium waist, but you're an extra large pouch. So the extra large is only about a 1/4 inch more than the medium. So what you can do is you can use go to the medium. That's your waist width, okay? But you're an extra large pouch. So when you cut this, you will gradually curve right into that extra large pouch here above this notch. And then you'll just use the rest of the extra large pouch and then gradually come back in to the medium size here. So this is your waist elastic, your waist width, and then this will be your pouch. Okay, so I know that I've heard from a lot of customers that they need a larger pouch for their waist size, and so that's one way that you can do it, and it won't affect the matching up here at all. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out of the way and explain that. So the other explanation for the pouch, where I raised the pouch here and it's a little bit more slender, I explained that in the introduction. Okay, so I'm actually ready to cut out. I am using this Starfish swim fabric. This is actual swim fabric. So it's 100% polyester nylon. And then I'm using this as my lining piece, and I'm only lining the front pouch, and this is called Helenca, Helenca. It's a great lining. It's 100% polyester, and it is a quick dry. So I'm using elastic. The pattern is built for 1-inch wide elastic. And then here is where the elastic for the leg, around the leg and the outer pouch is. And I'm using 3/8 wide inch elastic. And that's what the pattern is designed for. Now today, this is actually knitted elastic. I'm just going to point this out. If you're going to be using swimwear elastic, then you should be using braided elastic. I ran out of my swimwear braided elastic, so that's why I'm using this. But the process is the same. The reason you want to use braided elastic for the swimwear is because braided elastic is heavier, and usually your swimwear fabrics are medium to heavy weight, and you need that weight of elastic that the braid gives you to hold everything together. So this suit probably won't look that great around the outside, but I'm just doing this for tutorial purposes. The suit will probably actually not be worn. So just be aware that you should be using braided elastic for around the leg openings, okay? So, and then I have my measurements for those cut out and ready to go. So with that, I'm going to get to cutting out. Okay, so now everything's cut out, so we can actually get started on putting this together. So I'm going to work with the front pouch first. We're going to get that taken care of. So I'm going to move all this other stuff to the side, and we don't really need the pattern pieces anymore. So just kind of fold this up here, and the elastic's going to go over here. Now with this front pouch, I cut this with the face side up, so I just need to place face sides together. So do this, and I'm going to sew the outside fabric, the printed fabric, and the lining all together along the center front seam. So I've got these lined up there, and then this, I know I had the face sides. I cut the face sides together. I did that on purpose. So sometimes on your linings you can't really tell. Unless it's a wicking, then you will definitely need to know which is the face side. Usually the knit curls to the face side. The other way you can tell is look at the selvage, and whichever side the holes are, the indentations are pointing up, kind of feels bumpy on one side, that's your face side. So I'm going to take my lining now, and then I'm just going to put it right on top of my other pair, my printed fabric pair. And I like to sew from the bottom all the way up here. So I think I'm going to have to turn this over. In fact, I'm going to do it the other way because I like to have the lining up. Actually, no, I'm going to keep the lining on the bottom. I changed my mind. But what I do need is I need to flip this over. And the reason is because in sewing, because I want to start here, in the machine we'll start here and sew around this way. So I just want to make sure all my edges are aligned with each other. And then I'm going to pin about an inch away from that edge. And this way, make sure everything is lined up. I kind of pat it a little bit just to make sure that there aren't any like bubbles or ripples there. The reason I pin about an inch away is so I don't really have to remove the pins as I sew. And that helps sometimes with the stretching, because as you sew, if you've been sewing knits, especially slippery knits like swimwear, they can stretch kind of out of control a little bit if you're not careful. And pinning it so you don't have to unpin it as you're sewing kind of keeps everything in alignment. Okay, we may have to remove this pin as we come around the curve. So when we sew, we're going to go around this curve. It's okay to stop and reset yourself. So as you're going on the curve, you don't really want to stretch this too much. You really want to maneuver that curve, turn this as you're sewing it, so it sews into the curve, kind of like you're driving, you turn into the curve. So we want the machine to drive into the curve here. But if you have to stop every little bit and reposition this into that curve, that's fine. You just don't want this area to stretch out too much. Okay, I'm using a double needle 4-thread overlock, and I think I have my stitch set at about a 3. It's a decent stitch for swimwear. All right, so let's get this sewn together. Okay, so we have this center front seam on the pouch sewn, and I removed my mat so I think you can see things better. So remove these pins. I might need those again. And then I'm going to turn this face side out. And when I do that, let's go to the inside. I want to make sure that the lining folds over the other way. That face side is turned out, right? So that we are enclosing this center seam. So now on this side here, what I'm going to do on this outside is I'm actually just going to run a basting stitch to hold that lining in place, because when we put the elastic on, we don't want that lining to kind of move around. And I'd rather do that now before I actually attach the pouch to the body of the garment, which we're going to do after. That's actually the next step. So I'm just going to run a basting stitch to hold this lining to the pouch, and I'm just going to run it with probably a length of a 4, and I'm not going to back stitch. So, and it's going to be about a 1/4 inch away. Now when we put the elastic on, after that we may need to break that thread so that it doesn't pop when we put it on. So I'm just going to go and do that really quickly. Okay, so now we have the front pouch all ready to go. The lining has been basted together. I'm going to bring in the body piece, which is really the back and the side. So this is what it looks like when we unfold it. Let's take this front pouch. Okay. That's what it looks like. Let me pull it the other way. All right. So this is what it looks like. So these are the parts we're going to sew onto the front pouch. Here, we've got to turn this over this way. So I want to match this side here. Match up those notches. And I'm going to put a pin. I'm going to do that again. And that's kind of far over on the camera, so let me kind of pinch this in a little bit so we get both of those sides so you can see it. So the pouch is face side down, and we want to match up those notches, and it's kind of like an angle. And I'm just going to pin this together just to hold on to it because we may need to kind of reposition in the machine. Now, I want to do all of these seams at the same time. So I'm trying to speed up these videos a little bit. I know some of them get long. So this side is pinned to this side. Then I'm going to take this other side and match it over here to this other side. And go ahead and pin that together. And we can reposition this in the machine. And then I also want to go ahead and sew the bottom of the pouch. So now if we pull this, here's the pouch. It's still face side together. This is the bottom of the pouch, and then this is the bottom of the back. So I want to take that and I want to match that to the bottom here. And I'm going to put a pin across here. And again, when we're over in the machine, we can just kind of reposition this. So we'll start here and then sew across. If we need to repin or kind of adjust this, we can do that while we're at the machine. But now I'm going to use my overlock double needle for thread. So this seam, and the bottom inseam. Okay, so we have those seams done, and they're such short seams, and you saw me just kind of reposition things while I was there. I took the pin out, so there's no real need to keep everything, a lot of pins there. So I'm just going to clean up these threads, because now we're actually going to work with the elastics. So, so all these seams are done, so that was pretty quick. So I actually want to do the hard elastic first, and I think doing the leg opening elastic is more challenging than the waist elastic. So let's do that first. Before we get there, let me just say I like to fold these seams on the up by the waist away from the front pouch. And then I also like to fold it away in the center, the inseam away from the front pouch. So when we do our elastic and we're putting it on, we're going to make sure that those are being folded in the correct way. So let's go ahead and prepare this garment first, and then I'll bring in the elastics. So we have to decide where we want the bulk of the elastic, because we're going to actually stitch this in a ring first, like this, and then we'll divide it in fourths. And there's going to be some sort of thickness that goes along with that ring. So we have to decide where we want that thickness. And I usually like to not have it in the front, but I like to, around here, if I turn this sideways, right around where the back is, just before it starts turning toward the rear, I like to kind of have it start right there. Now this position is kind of important because this is where we're going to start dividing the legs into fourths. So this leg opening. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently walk those cut edges of the leg opening. Try not to stretch. all the way around. And it may or may not come to that seam, and it doesn't. I'm a little over. You could use the bottom seam as a fourth, but that may not work for all sizes. So I'm going to put a pin there. And then I'm going to match those two pins up for my other pins to go. And again, I'm just going to carefully walk each of these edges. And once I get to the folded part, that's where I'm going to put the pin. This is just like how I do the waistbands. Okay. So let's see if I can get these to match up again. Okay, and then walk this side. Now some parts of this, the rear end is really curved, so you have to make sure that you're just kind of looking at that curve. Don't try to stretch it because that's won't be an accurate fourth. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do the tutorial for one side, and then you can do the same for the opposite side. So we've got this leg opening divided into fourths. Okay, so let's just set this aside for a minute. I'm going to bring in the elastics. And we've already cut those. We don't need that anymore. And what we want to do is we want to overlap these and stitch it together with our regular sewing machine. And if I would have brought my ruler in with my pen, I wouldn't have to lean over. So we're going to overlap these at 1/2 inch. So on either end of these, we will mark 1/2 inch. And this is a erasable marker. One of the things that you want to make sure when you're doing this is that you don't get your elastics stretched. Twisted like this. So we want to make sure that everything stays flat, and then bring the ring over and match those lines on top of each other. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pin this in place. Okay, so make sure that you don't have any twist. Make sure it's not twisted like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do with my straight stitch, it's such a short distance here, I will stitch those few stitches back and forth, and then I will turn it and I will zigzag from the cut edge of underneath to the cut edge on the top. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do in the sewing machine. And then while I'm at it, while I'm in the machine, I may as well go ahead and do the waist elastic, and I'm going to do the same exact thing. So mark each of the ends 1/2 inch. Whoops, I already had it open. Mark that end, and then bring this other end. Mark that 1/2 inch. All right, and then overlap these. The only difference with this is that I'm not going to do the zigzag. So here I'm just going to go back and forth and stitch over that. Okay, so I'm pretty much all ready with my elastics. I'm going to get my elastics all ready, and then we'll be right back to put the elastic around the leg opening. Okay, so now that we have the elastics all ready to go, what I'm going to do is we're going to do the leg elastic first, and I'm going to divide this into fourths. So right here I'm marking, folding that in half, and trailing down to the other side. And I'm just going to mark this with my erasable pen. This is kind of too narrow to mark with a pin. So, and then I'm going to match that up to that marking. And then on either side I'll mark this. So it's just basically dividing this ring into fourths, just like we did the leg opening. And then we're going to match these markings to the pins on the suit. So now remember this here, this was the pin where we decided where we wanted that bulk. So what I'm going to do is I will match that mark to the mark on the elastic. And then I will walk the elastic around to match up all of the other pin marks. Okay. And once we get that done, there will be some stretch. So you will be stretching the elastic to match the size of the garment, basically. And you will need to make sure that see here in the rear where it's curved, you will need to stretch that to make sure that that edge of that elastic gets to, the edge of the garment gets to the elastic. Because if we don't, if we just cut that fabric off, we won't have that curve, and we need that curve to actually kind of cup onto the rear end. So now let's kind of look at this. And so there's a certain amount of stretch in each section. And just remember that we're not stretching a whole lot. We're just stretching a little bit because the whole of the leg opening is already much smaller than your leg circumference anyway. So we don't want it to be too tight. Okay, so I'm just doing this one. I'm just showing you this one. I'm going to do the other leg off camera, and then we'll come back here. And I actually just remembered that we have to put a buttonhole in this, and we've got to do that before we put the waistband on. So I'm going to go sew the leg elastic, get it applied to the garment, and then we're going to put the buttonhole in. We'll be right back here. Okay, so now that we have the leg elastic, we're actually going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to actually do the buttonhole. Now, if I would have remembered to do the buttonhole, I would have done the buttonhole before I actually sewed these diagonal seams on, or what could be considered the side seams, because now I have to worry about these side seams, this thickness going back and forth under my buttonhole foot. So so that's what I would do, is like after I got the front lining on the pouch, then I would actually put the buttonhole in, and then I would actually do this seam. So, but because I forgot about it, I've got to do it now. So now if you don't if you don't want to mess with that buttonhole, of course you don't have to. It just adds a little bit of security. If you're in the water, sometimes the elastic isn't tight enough to hold everything on, so you need that drawstring. So the other thing you could do is you could put it over here on the side, and I've been seeing a lot of manufacturers do that. So just be aware that you just have the one layer. So when I do my buttonholes, I actually put something on the bottom because this is really slippery underneath, and a lot of times the feed dogs don't like to pick it up. So what I do is I put a nice piece of muslin underneath where I'm going to make the buttonhole while the machine is sewing, and actually the feed dogs will grab that and it will help it along. So one of the things to remember is that we are using 1-inch wide elastic. So I'm going to mark, and I won't be able to chalk anything or draw on this fabric. So I'm just going to pin the 1 inch here, approximately. I guess this is the side I'm putting the buttonhole on. So remember that we fold this over once we've got that elastic on. So the buttonhole has to go in the middle somewhere here. So I'm going to just kind of eye it here and say like right there. Okay, and so that's about my location of where my buttonhole is here, in halfway between the pin and the edge of the fabric. So I think I want to sew this way or this way. I think I'm going to sew this way, so I've got to reposition these pins. Okay, so I can't go past this second pin because that's where we're folding the elastic over. All right. You could also put the buttonhole on the outside if you want as a design detail, but I'm putting it on the inside. So I'm going to run over to the machine. I've got it all set up, and let's hope, cross your fingers for me, that the buttonhole kind of comes out okay. Okay, so the buttonhole came out fine, and you saw me help it along. Sometimes when it goes in reverse, it needs a little help or a little guidance because of the stretchiness, but this muslin under here really helps. So I'm actually just going to cut this off, and be careful not to cut your suit or the lining. So just cut this extra off. I'm going to actually not open the buttonhole right now. I'm going to wait till I get the waist elastic on, which we're going to do in just a sec here. All right, so that's all ready to go. All right, so there's the buttonhole. Now we're going to prepare the waistband, the waist area for the elastic. So we're going to fold it here at the center front, and we're going to divide that waist into fourths. So just like we did with the legs before, just carefully fold that in half. I'm going to put a pin here. This would be the center back. And then I'm going to match that pin up to the center front seam here, and then just carefully match up these sides here. And there is a slight curve, and that slight curve up to the back gives you a little bit more height to the suit in the rear. That pin didn't want to go in. So, and then do this with the other side. And then we're going to do the same thing with the elastic. We didn't do that before, so we'll have to do it now. So we'll just want to divide this elastic into fourths, starting at this seam. Once you make a few of these, you get into the rhythm, and you just know what to do. And so when I make several pairs, if I'm making these for some friends, what I'll do is I'll just make all of the waistband elastics and leg elastics all at the same time, and that they're already ready to go. Okay, so divided into fourths, I'm going to actually match the stitched end to the center back, which is here, right? So I'll match that there. I like to pick that up, and then I'm going to overlock this on. I'll take this center pin. I'm going to pin it at a kind of at a diagonal, even though that's where I'm starting. And then I will just match all of the other pins and make sure that as you go around that you're not twisting the elastic. So I've done that before where I haven't really been paying attention because I get going fast and I think I'm a pro. And I get halfway through the elastic and I realize that I had it pin twisted. So at the center front, there's not a pin, just remember. So I like to just kind of remove the old pin, the marker pin, and use that to pin it. Now you'll have to stretch the elastic to match the garment. I'm removing these other pins because I'm going to stitch on the top. So I've got that all pinned on. So I'm going to start here at the center back, and I'll be going this way. So you'll just need to stretch the elastic, and then sometimes if you stretch the elastic to match the size of the suit and then just a little bit more, that gives you just a little bit more stretch, so when you're pulling it on yourself, you won't hear any popping of the stitches, okay? So again, I'm gonna put this on just like I put the leg elastic on, 3-thread overlock, single needle. Okay, so we have the elastics all on, and all we need to do is turn these over and stitch them down. Now today I'm going to be using a cover stitch machine, which is actually the straight lines that you see on the outside of the garments, and I'm not going to do the zigzag. So I asked my IG, my Instagram followers what they wanted to see, and it was an overwhelming cover stitch. So if you're not following me on Instagram, it's at Robert Joseph Sewing. At Robert Joseph Sewing, that's all one word. So I also post when I release new patterns there as well. plus some other sewing stuff. So I'm using my cover stitch machine. I'm not going to teach you how to use the cover stitch machine right now, but there are a couple of things you will notice. I'm using 2 needles, and the width of the needles is 1/8 of an inch between each other, and that's called gauge. I also have a piece of tape on the bed of the cover stitch machine, and that's to help guide me in my waistband placement. So I'm using 1-inch elastic, so I have the tape placed 1 inch from the furthest needle, which is the left needle. So, and that will help me guide from this edge. Now, I don't have a piece of tape for the elastic of the leg opening because it's too narrow. So I have to find a place on the presser foot and the top point of the presser foot, and I'll probably just tap it so you see where I'm guiding to. But the idea is that you get one of the needles, the farthest needle, to just go on this side. Let's see, can you see that in the light? Just go right here. So the cover stitch actually covers all of where my overlocking is. So on t-shirts or active apparel, they don't actually finish the edges. They actually just cover stitch them, and it covers the raw edges. That's why it's called the cover stitch. So, and you just see the 2 stitch lines on the outside. So, but before that, so you see what I'm doing, and I don't normally do this when I'm just making suits for myself, is you're gonna fold over. I'm going to do the waistband first, and then you'll see me do the leg openings, but I'm going to do it all in one sitting. So fold it over here at the edge of the elastic. And you want this to be kind of flush. You don't want to have any extra fabric gaping over the top edge. So fold this over, and I'm just going to pin it in place. And I'm going to do that in several places. And I really should be doing it on the top. So when we fold it over like this, we see the inside of the garment. So, but we're going to be stitching on the outside of the garment. So that's why we need those guides. So I'm just going to flip this over, and then I'm going to have to reposition those pins. And while I'm mentioning that we're stitching on the outside of the garment, or the face side, you're going to have to use your fingers and feel where the edge of the elastic is, especially for the leg opening. And as I come around to get the rest of this pinned, let me just get this all pinned. I will explain what I mean by that. So when you cover stitch, you're going to have to use actually a lot of your hands and your fingers to help you sew this. So especially if you have thicknesses, like I have these seams in the front, we're probably going to help the cover stitch machine go over that, depending on what type of cover stitch machine you have. Okay, so my waist is all pinned. So what I mean by this is, let me kind of start somewhere here. So I'm going to fold over this elastic here on the leg opening. Let me just get it pinned here on the top in a couple of places, because I don't really want to talk over at the cover stitch. I did that for another tutorial. I did that for the sling sack. So maybe I'll put that as the next video for you to watch as a suggestion at the end of this video, because I talk a little bit about the cover stitch there. But you see where this edge of this fabric is? When you're in the cover stitch, you're going to have to put your finger along here and feel where that edge is to guide it in there. And so you'll see me kind of feeling the top of this as we go. And I usually will probably take these pins out, because you can turn this over and then just kind of feel where that edge is, and then guide it into where that needle is. All right. So I'm going to do the waistband first, and then I'm going to do the leg openings. And then we'll be right back here to insert the drawstring, and we'll be done. Okay, so we have all the elastics done. We have just one more thing to do. And let's turn this inside out. Whoops, I got a thread here. I'm going to clip that off. We are going to do the drawstring. If you've done the drawstring, so remember we made that buttonhole. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to just kind of stab in here with my seam ripper. Be really careful not to get the elastic. And just remember that you have muslin in there, so it may feel a little thick. And then I'm just going to trim this open here. Be careful that you don't cut to the end. Okay, I see elastic, so we're good. So you'll need a big safety pin. And then I've got the drawstring, I've got it pre-cut. Now the way I cut the drawstring is I cut it 10 inches longer than the waist. So if your waist is 32 inches, I cut it 42 inches. So I've got it cut and I just kind of make a knot on one of the ends. And actually I'll just go ahead and do it on the other end too, because this is not actually coming out the one side. So I'll take a safety pin, I pierce into the middle of that knot, what's on there really good. And then I insert into the buttonhole. And then I just kind of push the fabric along, kind of like a little inchworm. Is just kind of move it along, feeling on the inside as you go. And this will probably just take you a few minutes. I'm going to speed the rest of this up. Okay, so now that I've come out the other end, what I need to do is I need to make sure I get enough of this back in there. I like to make the remaining lengths, the outside lengths of the drawstring, I like to make them even. So just kind of push that around. Let's have a look here. I think we have a little bit more. I can pull a little bit more here, hold on to it here, and then just kind of smooth the rest around. All right, that looks pretty good. Take the safety pin out. I'm going to just trim these extra things off. But don't cut the knot off. Okay, and then I'm just going to quickly kind of tie this in a loop knot. Okay, so there's your drawstring. Turn it inside out. And there you have it, your beach cruiser. So this is a nice sexy little suit to cruise out on the beach. I hope you are going to be at a beach or at a beach. I'm not. I'm stuck here at home for the time being. But if you've got this far, congratulations. And once you get to making these, they really don't take that long. So it's just probably the elastic will give you a little bit of a problem. That's a little bit of a learning curve. But if you got this far, congratulations. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. Every time I list a new video, that means I've listed a new pattern so for you to try out. So as soon as you subscribe, you'll get those notifications. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Robert Joseph Sewing. And again, thank you for watching this video and be well.